Afternoon, this is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Thursday, March 13th, 2025. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And we are also, in addition to taking up the FY26 budget, we have bills that come to our committee. And so today we are going to be looking at H219, an act relating to creating a family support pilot program for incarcerated parents and guardians. And we have Ben Novogoski from Lynch Council and James Duffy from Joint Fiscal. And anybody else who wants to join? Sean, do you need to come up or?
Only a meeting.
You need to join the crowd, the party. Join the party, that's the problem.
Give me front side.
So, gentlemen, if you will introduce yourselves for the record, and then we'll get going. We all have a copy of the fiscal note. We don't have a copy of the bill, but we can find it on here. And Trevor will be our reporter for this bill.
So for the record, my name is Ben Novogoski from the Office of Legislative Counsel.
John Sweeney from Corrections and Institutions.
James Duffy, Joint Fiscal Office.
So just a brief overview of the bill without getting into too many details. So what this bill attempts to do is, the amended version that left the committee is now proposing to change the name from a pilot program to an established program that would be implemented in phases. But what this does is essentially codify an already existing program that Lund operates in the women's facility, Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility, to essentially facilitate family-friendly visitation and communication and programming for those individuals who identify as parents and guardians to help maintain family contact and relationships, essentially. And so what this bill does is propose to codify it and expand it statewide so that there's gender parity amongst all of the correctional facilities in the state. And
Right, do you have a question?
So it's already in the women's facilities and it's not in the men's facilities. We're expanding it, proposing to expand it to it.
correct, right now it's a contract-based program between Lund and DOC. And it's been operating in the women's facility, I believe, for 20 years. 20 years.
Any idea what the cost is in the women's facility?
Well, I think that's probably reflected in section 5 of the bill.
About $230,000 a year. And the men's facility, they're going to start it out at the Northeast State Correctional Facility. They're not going to go statewide yet. They need to bring it up to speed. So and that program's going to take about the same amount.
And the statewide implementation would occur by 2028. The as introduced bill actually has a sunset of the pilot program by that, but that was a change that was done in House Corrections. And the two sections that are probably most relevant to this committee's jurisdiction would be section 2 and section 5 of the bill. So section 2 of the bill amends the commissioner's responsibilities to include sufficient funding to operate the program in the budget that's proposed to the legislature. And so that would be something that happens every year. And then section 5 are the two appropriations, one directly for CRCF, the women's facility, and the other for Northern State Correctional Facility. So the women's facility appropriation would be $115,424. And then from the general fund to DOC to support the program. And then $268,155 from the general fund to DOC to establish and support the program at Northern State Correctional Facility.
Go ahead, and I have questions too.
And it talks about being a pilot, right? Is that for 1 year?
So the pilot was the as introduced version. In committee, they changed it so it would be an established program with phased implementation by 2028. So it would start at these two facilities, but the intent would be to bring it statewide by 2028. So it's no longer a pilot. I defer to my colleague at JFL.
Maybe I should wait and wait.
John?
Oh, that was gonna be a question I was gonna ask, but we can wait if you want to cover
All right,
that more.
well-
Stuff first, okay.
And my question is, isn't it already happening at the women's facility now?
It is.
And is the 115 what's in the, what they're spending now?
They raise 115 and we've been giving them 150.
So it's, okay.
Yeah.
And I just lost my second question. Okay. Other questions? Do you want to keep it, Lynn?
Yeah, you can say they raise a fund raises that, and then 15,000 that we come up with is out of general.
Correct.
And we're already spending 115.
Correct.
That's been in the budget, so that,
One last follow-up. Will Lund continue to raise 115,000 to help offset this?
I don't know.
No, they will not. This is part of them trying, they're trying to make this a program that we fund.
and it would come out of the Department of Corrections budget. But
We'll
it
be
would,
looking at 300 and something thousand,
right,
350,000 or something. Without Lund.
Correct. Yeah, probably upwards of 400 to be safe, I think would be a good way to think of it.
Trevor, do you wanna?
Yeah, it might be a good time for me to weigh in. Since we're
Yes.
Talking about money here. This appropriations are not needed, okay? And I've already talked to Budget Council about drafting and having all the appropriations out of here, okay? Within the DOC budget currently, there's a justice reinvestment to, within the grant section of that budget line. And there's $490,000 just sitting there to be used for, let's say, reentry services. A council was convened a couple of years ago, Coordinated Justice Reform Advisory Council. And in part, their responsibility was to look at the justice reinvestment to the money that was there, that was twice as much as this a few years ago, and make recommendations on how to use that. Since it's down to about 490,000, the council made a recommendation that DOC make decisions about how to appropriate that money to reentry services, whatever they may be. It occurred to me as we were having this conversation, actually in the fall last year, that we had this money's already sitting in the budget. It wasn't accounted for, wasn't appropriated by DOC or allocated by DOC. And they needed 100 of that to go to a particular program that DMH is running, and it left about 390,000. And we've used it for various things over the past few years, such as community justice centers, things like that. So I talked to House Judiciary and folks there, and I've talked to folks on corrections and institutions about my proposal to take that 390,000, use that for this particular program as proposed in this bill. Just so happens their ask is 390, there's about 390,000 sitting. So I thought it was a good fit. Everyone seems to agree with that. Department of Corrections obviously likes this program, and they're very comfortable with doing that also. This would actually be based on for this program.
And so my question is, I'm sorry, no, and then Tip, it's using JR2 money this year, and then what happens the following?
That
year?
money's always there.
It's always there.
Yeah.
In their budget.
So
Oh,
this-
okay,
This
so
will
it
become a base.
become base but funded, not new general fund money is what I
Well,
want.
it's their budget general fund.
Right,
But no new money.
but they,
Let's
right,
put it that
it would come out from JR2 where money is put in every
Yeah.
year. Okay.
I like this way of thinking.
Okay, good thinking. So Tip and then Rita.
Yeah, so in a former life, I ran an organization that provided prison programming, and we followed the women from one prison to the next, and along with Kids Apart. And I have a great deal of respect for that program, that it is often it makes family connection possible. It's, it can be a very, very scary place for us again, for kids, so that, they're, Kids Apart has trained staff and created space, and kind of rituals that I think are are really important to maintaining those connections. So I think your proposal is a really smart one.
So my questions would be about, the best use of the money. Obviously, reentry is a big deal, and getting people to reenter society and be stand up in good shape is a very important thing. In this case, you don't see that kind of direct benefit. And my concern, the committee must have taken testimony. It's a different thing in women's prison versus men's prison. We have people in there that are pedophiles that have been sexual assault, all kinds of issues in there. Will there be the kind of protections to make sure that children coming in won't be associated with people that are actually a bad influence rather than something building a family relationship? So between those things, which is the better investment?
So within the contents of the bill, one of the considerations is creating family-friendly visitation spaces. So that's sort of implied within that directive. And there's also reentry aimed services that are provided as well. So it is sort of a holistic description of what the charge of the program is, which is, keep those family connections, nurture them, develop them, and then help prepare them for reentry when it's time.
And Wayne, the other thing too, that being a money committee, I don't want this to sound cold, but you look at it as an investment. We're looking at the people costing $100,000 a year to be incarcerated. This program has had success that I've spoken to Jessie about it, the woman who runs the lung program, and she has seen over the years kids have the relationship with their parents, but also break the cycle of being incarcerated. And she's watched kids graduate from high school and go to Champlain College. And we need to steer the kids that way, not back into corrections, which just costs us more money. So I really feel that the program is worth every dime that we could be putting into it.
So in a sense, it's a deterrent.
Preventative and supportive.
Yeah, thank you.
Mike?
If I could just add some personal experience to assuage your concerns. When I worked at Family Services, I facilitated visits like this. I would drive, in this particular case, an infant to the women's prison in South Burlington. Everyone is segregated. Whether me, you go in, empty your pockets, you go through you get searched. It's not like it's an open situation where everyone there can just come around freely. It's not a very great space, but a space where the mom, child in this case, could interact. And in this case, since it was an infant, it was especially, I think, important for attachments to start to be made between mother and child. And in this particular instance, it had a really good outcome because eventually she graduated from London and got clean and sober, and it's a good outcome there. But it's not like they just opened it everything.
I would imagine that the kids are a great motivator to.
I was on institution corrections the last couple of years, so I know what's going on. So thanks.
Yeah, did you hear any testimony about the difference, when you talk about the difference between men and women? I have a correctional institution in my community. It's been for men for many, many years, and for 1 year, might have been the year that my fellow representative was working with them, we moved the men out, moved the women in. The social environment that I understood was that the men come, the families follow them, whoever happens to be their family at the time or whatever formation it is. But with women, they come to the correctional center and they leave their families with grandmothers, or it's not like they don't move to your town to live there. They stay where they come from. And when they get out, they go back to where their family, their parents or their children or whatever. Did you hear anything about that impact, or that societal impact on why the women may be very successful with this? I mean, it's they may have a support system, they may have a different motivation. Men may not necessarily have that. I mean, did you hear anything about that?
So, unfortunately, there's not a lot of data. There's not a lot of programs where men have contact with their kids. So this would be breaking some new ground. Lund did do I think it was with Lund and DOC, did a survey, and they surveyed the men in the prison. And there were 400 that identified, I think, that had kids. Only 100 of them wanted to be part of this program. But they all were they put it very high on their list that it would be something that they'd be very interested in. So the women, there's not always success stories with the women. And we heard that it doesn't always work. But what we heard is that what Jess shared with me is that a lot of the women who come out of South Burlington definitely go back to whatever home that their kid is in, then, and then they are doing so much cross education about them coming out into the world. They do a lot, a good success rate with the ones who, it's not 100%, but they have seen that this program works.
And on the data collection piece, so in section 3 of the bill, 120 it'd be 28 VSA 128 sub D creates an annual reporting requirement, so that DOC would submit written reports to the standing committees of jurisdiction concerning funding, participation, program outcomes, and any other considerations and progress towards statewide implementation and gender parity. So as Representative Sweeney said, this is sort of new ground, but part of what's contemplated in the bill is to get that info to help adapt, help answer funding questions, things of that nature.
We spend $230 million a year on corrections, and a lot of that isn't for making people better. This is a small amount of money that has a proven track record that actually helps people get back into our society, and we all benefit from that.
So I would like to ask you what the committee vote was. I'll probably just take your question.
So,
Is it on here?
it came out. I think it's either 10, or was it? Out of here somewhere.
Great question.
It was, yeah, I don't have that.
Just says.
Oh, I thought that was the draft. Not the draft.
Introducing it.
I'm gonna have.
All right. So there was only one person voted against it. Yeah. So I think it came out 9-1-1.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's great.
So sunsets in 2028.
So that's the as introduced version you're probably looking at. So the committee version that came out as amended is there's no longer sunset. It's now an established program that would have full statewide implementation by 2028.
Okay. So it's more of a question for Trevor, because you looked into this here to some degree. So this would just, there's monies that are already there, not being used, correct? Is that what we were referencing? And it just so happens to add up to about this amount of money or recovered in full.
Coincidence. Same amount.
And corrections feels good about using that for
Yeah,
this
that
reason.
conversation. And it's consistent with the recommendations of the coordinated frequent advisory group council also. That fits into the kinds of work that we're asking DLC to do.
Thank you.
Okay.
And one other thing I just want to add, maybe to Lynn, is that, and just kind of in the nuts and bolts of this, Lund gets the kids up there usually the night before. You're talking about a kid coming from Brattleboro, going up to visit his or her, dad up in, Northeast, in the Northeast Kingdom. So they give them money to get up there. They put them up in hotels the night before. They give them food money. So they really try hard to make this happen. And that's all part of this budget.
And I can confirm it was a 9-1-1.
Okay. So, as with most programs, committees should be checking and reviewing and making sure that they're doing what they want. And it sounds like, you know, you're gonna be reviewing it the house on a regular basis. And as you make budget decisions in future years, you will have information on which to make good decisions. That's the plan.
We will be doing that next year at this time.
Okay, you're live, Jim.
I'm done on, whenever you're done on this, I just have a question.
Why don't you ask the next question?
I'm just curious, if you have a strategy this year in the March Madness.
It's still being formulated and, I'm going to take the full allotment of time before submitting my draft.
It's gonna be part of HCI. Don't you worry about it.
Okay, so now we have an amendment.
And put something together.
And it's on the screen before the committee
And
now.
it must be, is it posted there?
No, I haven't sent it to Aaron yet. I literally just did it.
We ask enough questions, you have time to do that. Would you send it to Aaron, please?
I will.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry that I may have spoke at you last session when you don't get police.
No, it's,
Sounds like he's poking again.
So then I was down there too, I was at the top.
I just checked, you ended up at 7-9, you had a good set.
hey, at one point though, on the women's side, I was, I think, top 3, top 2, but then I fell from grace. I had a feeling that question was coming.
I'm sorry. It'll be tough the next couple of weeks.
And we have a budget too.
That's.
Aaron, so I just sent it to you, so it should be coming momentarily.
And I noticed that the signing your document out there was just the first name. It's really impressive.
Oh, well, it's actually my initials. So Benjamin Elliott Novogrodsky. And that was very intentional on my mother's part, apparently.
You never be lost.
Exactly. Well,
Thanks, Mom.
as she explained to me that I was gonna have a very long name, so she thought maybe I'll do him a favor with the initials, and he just signs with his initials, and that's actually how it ended up turning out. So there you go.
So I think we should have, James talk about the fiscal note, even though we've had a talk but because you came, you did the fiscal note. So while we're getting this ended up, why don't you talk about the fiscal note?
Yeah, sure. But I think Ben covered it, fairly well. It's a straightforward fiscal impact. There are 2 appropriations as this was originally sent to the committee from the general fund, which, as the representative pointed out, totaled just under $390,000. Before, in the fiscal note that's before you now, that would have come from the general fund to support these 2 programs at each of these correctional facilities. But it sounds as though the amendment that's going to be before the committee momentarily would change that funding source out of the general fund. Representative, I can't quite pull the name of the funding source that you had identified.
Justice reinvestment too.
Thank you. Yeah. And so this fiscal note would be amended if that amendment passes out of committee, and would essentially strike that first half of the fiscal impact that's identified on page 1. And the second piece alludes to the fact that the bill directs the Department of Corrections to come up with a plan to phase expansion of this program by 2028 statewide. It also directs the Department of Corrections to include sufficient funding to continue carrying out these services in future budget proposals to General Assembly. So to the extent that those proposals are passed by the General Assembly, enacted into law, that would be a future fiscal impact.
So I'm cluing into your amendment, which basically deletes the funding source. So we don't have to say that it's coming out of JR2.
Right.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about the amendment? Wait.
I haven't seen it.
It's, no, this is it.
Yeah, and so just to explain,
Yeah.
well, I was just gonna say, all it does is strike, it deletes section 5, the appropriation, and then it remains the same otherwise.
Right, so this is, we haven't done one of these in this committee yet, I don't think, this year. But when we do amendments, we do it as a committee and we'll vote on the amendment. And then we will vote on the bill as amended by our committee.
Your hope to vote this out.
No, we don't need to vote it out today. We have not announced that we're gonna vote it out today. So we won't. I may just have us do a bunch of bills at the same time. I'm still working on that. There's no time, there's no rush of this. I know, so. Right. So if we have a couple at the same time, then we just get them out instead of sporadically having to do them. I'll discuss it with the clerk. You're welcome to insert your opinions, Dave.
You already hear about that, and then they try to vote 6 bills on it.
It gets to be a bit much, but if I let the clerk know, if I let the clerk know ahead of time what bills we're going to try to vote out that day, the clerk can prepare him or herself, themselves.
But if you
for that.
have drips and drabs, then people will remember who you are.
Oh, there's so many options for doing this. Does anybody have any? Sorry. It's stuck, Phil.
Duck down.
Does anybody have any questions about either the amendment or the bill, or where the money's coming from, or anything else? We all clear on this, and we'll remember it next week when we vote? Let's vote tomorrow.
Clear.
Yeah, and just one point, the way that this would work, for maybe some newer members, is that this is an amendment to amend the report of the House Corrections and Institutions Committee. So it's not an amendment of the bill per se.
It's a member, yes, because they've already amended the bill.
They amended the bill, they voted it out, and so this would amend the report of that committee.
Okay.
Great. The first bill I'm reporting is good, really simple.
This is it.
This is it.
Okay. And then trouble will come up.
If you vote it out.
Yes, and then what's gonna happen is we'll have this amendment, that's right, and then you guys are gonna have to do a straw poll on the amendment.
Okay.
So, and I expect, does your chair already know that we've had this conversation? About,
Yeah, I felt that.
you've talked to Alice.
But if she wants me to come on committee,
That's right.
Okay, so maybe we'll vote it out tomorrow. Because there's no general fund money, we don't have to leave it hanging around.
Right.
But we haven't announced that we're gonna vote it to, how much time do we need to allow to, before we do a vote, Erin? What's what's reasonable? Should we wait till tomorrow or can we do it later today? That's it's up to you. Up to you.
We can really do this anytime.
I think you can do, overnight gives people an opportunity to read it.
Think about it.
I always tried to do 24 hours, but a lot of time that wasn't possible, but.
It will not be likely here on many things, but we can give this one 24 hours, even though it's an easy one. So we'll
Or
vote
just
on this
overnight.
tomorrow morning. That's tomorrow.
It's not 24 hours.
We're not doing 24 hours. There are gonna be bills that we have where we are deciding things very quickly. Gentlemen, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
I think our questions have been answered and we know where to find Sean and Trevor if we have other questions. Appreciate your time. We'll see you back here again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So,
Chair,
what do you want to do, Emily? Wait 15 minutes?
Great.
Yes. Let's go up live. We'll